So welcome to this session on the Exoskeleton for Hadoop. I'm from Acton Corporation. I'm the CMO there. The Acton Corporation is about turning data into transformational value for our customers, and that's what Acton does. So I'll tell you about that in a second. Having said that, it's right here. But seeing that it's a cozy audience, let's make it interactive, okay? So if you have questions or if you want to talk about how these things are done from experience, as long as we don't get into the technology, because we'll get into rabbit holes, we can do that on the booth outside. Let's make it interactive, okay? So what are we going to talk about today? It's just four things. And the whole story goes like this. Everybody's starting to acknowledge now that big data is big value. And I don't mean value just in money terms. Big data has the capability of transforming your business, completely transforming your business, right? And a year ago, I've been doing this for 2 years on the road. And 2 years ago, we had to spend a lot of time explaining why and how. Because people didn't believe that big data could transform businesses. Now I think it's pretty much accepted, right? So we know that big data is big value. McKinsey says 15 trillion. I mean, that's bigger than the US domestic product, right? So it is big value. Whatever the number is, it's huge. But certain organizations are winning and becoming leaders in their sectors or in the whole global market just using big data, right? We see the Google, Yahoo or type of organizations. But for the most of us, for the rest of us, so we call it big data for the rest of us. Big data for the rest of us seems unattainable. It's just too far, right? It's too far because it's hard, no skills, access to data, all sorts of problems that we can talk about. And what Acton does is 2.5 years ago, we set off on a journey with a simple mission. We want to make big data transformational for all businesses, right? Making big data available to everyone. And that doesn't mean that we don't have large organizations as customers, as you'll see from this slide. But that's what it's all about, right? So big data is big value, but it's hard to get to. So how do we all get to that? So for those of you who don't know Acton, Acton is an organization with a history that goes back 30 years. We were Ingress before, and a lot of other things grown into this area where we now have probably one of the world's leading platforms to allow our customers to do this. Just take a couple of examples. A couple of global top 20 banks there, one of them using analytics, providing risk management to the entire bank, as opposed to the audit department. And risk management was a science in its own right. It is now embedded into all the departments. Another one of those is now able to respond to market events in about in minutes, whereas it used to take them hours, if not a day, right? They used to have these simulations that ran over 4 to 5 hours. And as soon as they presented to the analysts, they'd have more questions. You probably know all about that. And they'd have more questions, and you don't do it again. They now do it in minutes. So how does data and analytics help them transform that, get that sort of transformation? Because it's huge value to the organization. That's what Acton does. That's all we do, focused entirely on data. So let's just get into some of that background and see if we can get to that nub of the story of how we get value out of data for everyone. I think we all know that the world has changed. This is the key thing that I see organizations not facing up to. They carry on with their businesses and not see that the world has changed. The world is now made up of data. And as our CTO says, the digital taps have been turned on, and data is now flowing from absolutely everything we see. Everything around us has data flowing from it. Our phones, our devices at home. Now we're talking about, with the Internet of Things, our fridges and our cars. You know, why did Google pay $3 billion? Was it $3 billion, $3.5 billion for a company called Nest? Nest make thermostats in the house, right? Why do they do that? Because they now have the ability to capture information about what we're doing in our house. What is the ambient temperature? When are we in? When are we out? And they're going to use that information to transform the services that they provide, right? So to them, you can see the value coming out. So data is everywhere. It's personal. It's corporate. The question is, what do we do with this data? It fundamentally changes the way we do business. And those organizations that don't catch it start to have some differentiated value, right? So we're going to look at that. It'll never be turned off. This change has happened forever. And with it comes significant opportunity. So we've got three things on the left-hand side here that I think we're all aware of. That's why we're here, right? The first one is we now have access to multiple sources of data. Talking to the Chamber of Commerce here in Holland earlier on, and we were talking about what data sources do you use to do what you do, right? Which is, what is the economy going to look like for Amsterdam over the next thing? How the business is going to survive and thrive? And the answer is we use publicly published reports from the organizations. What if you were able to use what's going on Twitter? So you could get sentiment for those businesses. What if you were able to access real-time live trading information as to what's happening, currency impacts on those businesses? You're able to forecast a lot more and a lot more accurately. So there are many, many data sources in every business that can help us. Low-cost storage, right? In the old days, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, a terabyte of information was a lot of information. It cost a lot of money to store. Now, we're talking tens of terabytes, right? Hadoop is now pervasive. It's everywhere. Every organization on the previous screen, on the previous chart that you saw, pretty much are looking at Hadoop one way or the other. But they all have one problem, and I'll tell you about that, or a series of problems. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So low-cost storage is there, and then the algorithms that allow you to look into the future. So you have the data, you have the means to store it and access it, and you have the means to look in the future. What does that do? Well, it allows you to transform your business. And I'll give you some examples. We find that when we look at our businesses, it's always in these four areas. It's always about increasing personalization of new products and services, decision-making, reducing risk. Right? So let me just pick one. New products and services. Amazon, I'm looking around because I don't know whether I'm allowed to say it. Amazon has Redshift. Everybody knows Redshift? Redshift came to the market and transformed the data warehouse business. Redshift is Actian. It runs on our platform, right? They were able to do that because of the massive scale and the speed that comes with having a platform like that, right? So new products and services, they come on board. I met the CTO, and he told me that Redshift is the fastest growing AWS service in Amazon, right? And that's how much it's transformed the market. They're making incrementally $1 million, incremental $1 million every minute using that. That's how much volume is being processed from pretty much nothing. Personalized experience. Top 5 telco that we're working with in the Far East is doing customer churn. And customer churn is something all telcos know about, right? And they pretty much manage it at the top line. Last quarter our churn was 17%, and this quarter our churn is 15%, so that's good. Well, we're now talking about analytics that allows people to get to a point where they can say, John Smith has a 97% probability of churning next quarter, so they can target John Smith. And we can do that with degrees of accuracy that's not been able to be able to done before. And we're doing this for telcos not because we've just come up with some radically new science. It's because we now have access to to a lot more data sources, right? We're looking at customers' Twitter accounts. We're looking at their location history. We're looking at different data sources, trying to see their purchasing history and seeing what those customers are doing, and then running the algorithms and getting a much tighter result than anything else, right? So that's personalizing experience. Now, you turn around and say to a massive telco like that, if you reduce churn by 1%, that's worth tens of millions to the bottom line. Tens of millions. Actually, it was embarrassing. In the proposal, we did the calculations, and it was looking like we could get churn down to, by 5-6 points a quarter for the next 3 quarters. And then we went to the annual report and tried to do the calculation back as to what it's worth. And we were embarrassed to present the number because it's literally hundreds of millions. And it really made a real serious impact on their profits. So it was like, they're not going to believe this. That's how transformational analytics can be. Improving decision-making. Office Max is a retail company. I'll talk more about that later on. And Future Group is probably the biggest retail organization in Asia. They're doing market basket and analytics every minute, and changing the merchandising and stock ordering as a result, every minute. They used to be able to do that in 6 to 7 hours, right? So they're once a day, basically, once a working day. Now they're able to do every minute. Think about the transformational value to that business. So simple things on the left-hand side provide transformational opportunity on the right-hand side. I've already talked about risk management. And as if we didn't know, McKinsey comes back and proves it, right? And what they're saying is that those companies using data strategically get more value, more revenue, more profit from that. And really, they characterize what they're doing, right? And we'll talk more about these things on the left-hand side on the next slide when we talk about why it's hard. But here's some examples. Look at credit cards, right? You can see a massive difference in profit between those organizations using analytics for fraud management and those companies that weren't. So it's intuitive, right? If I can find out a fraudulent transaction in 15 seconds and stop it, I've got an advantage over the guy who takes a minute. And I've got a severe advantage over the guy who takes 5 minutes. And 5 minutes was the gold standard not so long ago, right? We now do it in seconds. It's very annoying. I was actually here in Amsterdam checking out of a hotel, and they stopped my Amex card. So while I was shouting at the guy behind the till, behind the reception, the phone rings, and he picks up the phone and he said, "Mr. Carrier," and he hands me the phone. It's American Express, and he said, "Are you Mr. Carrier?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You noticed that we've stopped your transaction?" And I said, "Yeah, we've got limited. What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, that's because we just had a transaction in Luton, or in the UK, and another transaction in Amsterdam, so, we're just checking." And I said, "Idiots. My wife has a card, right?" He said, No. Your wife's in Brent Cross shopping. She's just bought a pair of shoes, and she's now in Boots. This transaction was in Luton and now in Amsterdam." So it's like, oh, my God. Talk about Big Brother. So on one hand, I was thankful that it was £500 worth of fraudulent transaction that I got back. But what was priceless was I phoned my wife straight after that, and I said, "Well, how are the pair of shoes?" And she freaked out as well. So I think in each industry, we can think of examples where data can make transformational difference to businesses, right? One of the games that I play, a lot of interviews, we're growing very fast, so I'm interviewing all the time. And in interviews, when I talk about transformational value and I see a blank look in the person, I say to them, name an industry or name a business, name anything, and I'll give you 2 examples off the cuff that would make transformational difference. And they come up with all sorts of things, right? They say a family-owned restaurant, right? And you just look at that and say, well, Thai family-owned, they have a menu tied to weather. People eat differently when the weather's colder. But they have one menu. They have to buy all that stuff. They have to keep all that stuff and store it. And there's so much wastage, right? So imagine what they could do if they know buying patterns according to weather. They could save a lot of money. Okay, so what about using the same information about their customers and their lifestyles and getting them to recommend friends? There were so many examples in every industry. So intuitive. The key thing that's coming out of this is those organizations that don't use the data start to fall back. Look at you can see credit cards. I gave you an intuitive example, but you can see the big difference it's made. Casinos. is another area. Now we're seeing the business transforming in online retailing. Those organizations that are not using data strategically are starting to fall back, and they're starting to become not relevant in the market, right? So they not only grow their business, they're doing it at the expense of people who are not taking that advantage. So the time to make that change starts to become very, very dramatic. Okay? So the journey to the best of class. This is one of these analyst slides, so I don't like them too much, but this one makes a point. And just take the point away. There's lots to talk about on the slide, but just take the point away. You know where our business was, right? It was all about business intelligence, reporting. We were looking backwards. We were looking in reports. And then the smarter thing we were doing was we were monitoring RFID chips for stock control. Was modern science, right? Not so long ago. And then raising alerts when stock levels fall below a certain amount. So that's what we were doing. But these companies that have become leaders in big data or starting to use big data to become leaders in their sectors are starting to do two other things. They're switching from being reactive to proactive. They're switching from looking backwards to looking forwards. They're switching from using the information they have inside their organization to data sources that are publicly available in all sorts of places and using that together, right? And then the really good ones are the ones that are starting to embed those analytics in every part of their business. Because the decisions are made at the point where your business meets the customer, right? And the lag in analytics, by the time you get it out there, is a problem. So the best ones are embedding it at the point of business, right? So if you're an online taking orders online, and a regular customer comes in and places an order for something, analytics running, presenting answers in seconds and saying, I noticed that you bought this, and therefore this would be something that would be valuable to you as well, increases that hit rate and conversion a lot better than not knowing that information about the customer. So this is the journey that everybody has to make, and the big transformation is right there in the middle. When you stop looking backwards and using information that's old, to looking forwards, using information that's right fresh, right current, and predicting. That's the transformation you have to make. And each one of you can look at this and say, where is my business? We did a survey on Hadoop not so long ago run out of the Stanford analysts. And what we found was that while Hadoop was pervasive in organizations, the bulk of organizations were pretty much experimenting with it, right? Experimenting with what to do after they collect the data, how to use it for real value to the organization. And there were very few on the right-hand side of the scale trying to get value out of it, right? So everybody's on this journey, and the leaders in big data are on the right-hand side. And when we look at leaders in big data, there are just 5 things that you really have to take care of. And if you take care of that, you can transform your business. And let's just quickly go through that. The first one is discovery without limitations. What does that mean? It means unconstrained analytics. Unconstrained by size of scale. I'm sure you've heard that a million times in this conference, right? It's unconstrained by size and scale. The more data you have, the more accurate an answer you get. It's intuitive. We know that. But what we mean also by discovery without limitations is that the analytics needs to take place in the part of the organization where it can transform, at the point where it meets the customer, right? So there can't be limitations as to where the analytics takes place. There can't be limitations onto how much data you have to look at, and there can't be limitations as to what you analyze. Okay, so that's number one. Number 2 is low latency at any scale. So what are we talking about? That goes back to Robin Bloor is a very wise man. He said one day to me that, he said, there is no business process on earth that doesn't benefit from acceleration. And I thought, I'm going to find an exception right here. So I started worrying, right? I started thinking of what doesn't get hurt if it doesn't go faster? And I couldn't think of one. And he's right. So low latency at any scale, what that's saying is It's not just about performance and speed. If you can do something in 1 second that you were able to do in 1 minute before, you're able to do things that you never thought of possible. If I gave you a car that was now doing 5,000 miles per gallon, the way you use your car changes, right? You think about different ways to use your car because possibilities open up that you never thought were possible. That's what we mean by low latency. Anything, I mean, I talked about fraud detection on credit cards. We know from personal experience, it's been around for years. What's changed? What's changed in that graph that organizations started to do 15% more profit and the organizations not using it were falling into losses was the time it took to do it. 5 minutes was the gold standard. It's now 5 seconds. And in that gap, they catch a whole bunch of credit card fraud and stop it before it impacts the bottom line, right? So that's the difference. So low latency at any scale. And what we find is that people have super fast performance where needed, especially investment banks when they're doing derivatives and trading, and a lot of our customers do that. But what they have is as soon as the data starts to scale up, latency drops off. It takes longer. It's harder, right? So it's low latency at any scale. The third one is static to dynamic flow. Oh, I love this one. What do we mean by this? How many people here have data warehouses in the organization as fundamental center? Okay. Here's what we think about data warehouses. Not that they're not necessary. They're essential. They're essential to certain parts of the business. But think about what's happening. In the real world, data is just flowing. It's being produced, right? On stock markets, you've got indices, you've got currencies, you've got news, you've got everything happening. Trade is happening all the time for government commerce, right? We bring that data into the organization, by the way, database guys, so I'm with you. We bring it in, we pour it into a database, and then we watch it. And the world's going on. The world is going on behind us. We watch it. We then process it. We do reports. We push data into data marts. What we're effectively saying is stop the world while we analyze what happened and then tell you what to do about it, right? So that's the one that's looking backwards. Static to dynamic flows talks about the world changing with this new information, with this amount of data. Those models that were perfectly valid 10, 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago, are no longer valid in order to exploit big data. They have a place in business, but they're no longer valid if you want to exploit big data. You have to process data as it flows dynamically, right, in order to get the best value. Otherwise, the world will have gone on, right? Reactive to predictive, I think I've talked about that already. It's not looking backwards, it's looking forward and looking at what it is. And the segment of one. A segment of one is where a telco can say, John Smith is going to leave us within the next 6 weeks with 97% certainty. As opposed to what they're doing today is they're saying a competitor has just launched an offer which is very attractive to the 18 to 25-year bracket. So our 18 to 25-year bracket is at threat. And that could be 20,000 customers. So they launch a blind campaign into these young people and try to keep them, right? Whereas this one says, John Smith has a 97% certainty of leaving from the analytics that we've done. That's what we mean by segmentation of one, right? In retail, you target individual customers. British Airways, you probably find British Airways a lot. British Airways, I didn't know. I got on a plane, I'd left them for a while, went to Virgin, because they gave me a broken seat and I was really pissed off. I went back to them after a while because they fly to places where other people don't. And the bursar came up to me and said, welcome back, Mr. Carrier. I said, what's he talking about? And he said, we know you haven't been using us for a long time and you've come back, so welcome back. And he did that in a first-class seat because I was promoted all the way up from wherever I was up to first class just to say thank you. How the hell did they know? My boss, Steve Shine, when he first got appointed CEO, the bursar came up to him in his seat, he didn't get first class, in his seat, and he said, congratulations, Mr. Shine, on your new appointment. So segmentation of one drives customer delight, one of those 4 things I talked about, transforms business. Do you think I left British Airways since then? No. No, because they've shown me that they want me as a customer, right? So it's important. Little things matter. Okay, but it's hard. It's really, really hard to do. That's why we're not all doing it. That's why we're not tapping into the $15 trillion that we have, okay? And I think all of you know about these. Information that we have is siloed in the stages. Data preparation is hard. Taking information out of Hadoop is hard. I was shocked. I mean, we haven't talked about this for a long time, and when I was talking outside to customers, they were still talking about overnight batch runs in order to update the databases with information that's flowed into Hadoop. Overnight batch runs. I really thought they went out a long time ago, but I can see the place where it's doing that in business. But that latency is not going to be acceptable when this tidal wave of data hits us, if we want to transform, right? This is the thing that came out in the survey as the most and the biggest common issue with Hadoop was the lack of skills. And the way I see it is this. Hadoop has all the data in the world, right? All the new data is being stored in Hadoop. But the world is full of SQL skills. Now, how do you make that transformation? The only way is to go through that painful process and put it into databases and use SQL skills, or get very expensive Hadoop skills. And that's why today the leaders in big data are the guys with deep pockets like Google, right? Because they have access to those skills. But we're talking about big data for the rest of us. So how do we make that happen? And all this affects the time it takes you to get value out of Hadoop. So it's hard. It's really hard to tap into that $15 trillion that McKinsey says is value as a result of data. And it isn't just technology. It's this as well, right? If you're in business, then inside your business is demanding faster and faster turnaround. I mean, how many customers just want instant gratification? They ask a question, they want instant gratification. I'll give you a real example. It made me laugh. I was on an American Airlines flight going coast to coast, and they just introduced Wi-Fi on the plane, right? Fairly novel, right? Wi-Fi on the plane. And I was sitting next to this guy, and he's going away doing his email and everything else. And it's a power worker. And then the Wi-Fi went zzz, and he stopped. And the guy went, oh, damn airline. And he was like, wait a minute. Last week, you had to sit there for 4.5 hours while we flew from one side to the other side. And now you have Wi-Fi on the plane. You got, we're at 20,000 feet. It's bouncing off the satellite that's 3 miles away, going down to the ground station, going into your corporate warehouse, and coming back to you, right? And you just got frustrated because it went zzz and played up. But it's typical of what people expect, right? It's typical what people want. They want instant gratification to everything they do. So customers in competition are starting to drive this pressure onto the business. And the business says, I need faster, I need more accuracy, I need SLAs, right? Every bank we talk to have SLA pressures. Why? Because the business is going faster. But we can't respond because we need time, we need money, we need everything else. And that leads to an inertia which actually makes the issue worse. It actually drives, so the issues are bad. And then fast forward all those issues put together, and you start to get a real bad outcome. And this is the rational drowning that gets to the bottom, which is with this massive change in the world of data, that's going to affect every one of us, believe me, every one of us. The cost of not reacting, the cost of not doing something about it is obsolescence. It's as simple as that. And when I look at those examples at the bottom, it's not that Barnes & Noble did not have a great online site. They had a great online site. They were the market leader. Amazon simply took it to the next level and did predictive analytics. People like you also you remember that? When you buy this music, people like you have also bought this. Simple things. And then they turn it around. Then they do analytics. Then they find out your buying behavior. Then they send you offers. Then it just leaves it behind. Whereas Barnes & Noble was saying, here's our warehouse, and people come in and we serve them. Well, we'll just do that online. There's no innovation there, right? And it happens everywhere. Blockbusters. Innovation with Blockbusters was, we're going to mail you the DVDs. 3 DVDs every month for whatever it was, $5.99 a month. Whereas Netflix said, stream it whenever you want. See the difference? So that is the use of data, and that's what happens. And that's what's happening all over the place. You will see businesses being left behind when leaders in big data take over, right? But there is a way out, and it's being done right now. Yahoo was given up for dead not so long ago, right? Google killed it, but now it's bursting forward. Our customer, they do digital marketing, hyper-segmentation every hour. They've got hundreds of thousands of segments on online stores. And what they do is they're doing analytics to present adverts back to people who get into the buying mode. So they detect purchasing behavior, and they present adverts for a higher rate of conversion that they immediately converse back to the suppliers who are now advertising with them more and more, and that's how they make more money, right? So you're browsing websites, travel sites, and after a certain behavior, you think you're going on holiday, they'll start to present those things. That's what Yahoo does with us. Evernote, customer analytics, purchase prediction every 2 minutes, right? They were doing that every day. They now do it every 2 minutes. Same as that Future Group in Asia. Jaiwire, personalized offers every minute. Jaiwire started off using Redshift. And they used Redshift for most of their stuff. And all the stuff that spills over, they use our platform for, right? The defense network, network intrusion. They're looking at attacks onto any parts of the government. And one of the problems was, before Homeland Security project started up, was they were very good at detecting intrusion and putting a stop to it. The problem was the damage was done in the time it took them to find out and do something about it. And it's down to a second. And they're trying to get it to nanoseconds. FIS, fraud adjustment, so every nanosecond, right? So there is a way. Customers are doing it all over, and we're helping them becoming leaders in business. So how do we do that? On the left-hand side, what you see is noise, signals, data sources, right? We turn those we turn that noise into signals as they flow through, and transform them into those sort of things that I've talked about. And we do that with a platform that does simply this, and it does it natively on Hadoop, or you can do it on databases, depending on the business need. It's all there in the platform. To connect to any data source at scale and speed, and to be able to process information as it flows, to be able to analyze that information before it gets to any database, if you wanted to run analytics on it. To run analytics, whether you want to analyze it in flow as it goes through your organization, or whether you want to park it in data warehouses, because there are still business processes that need warehousing technology, super analytics required, and we do that at scale. And the ability to take action as the event happens, right? And it's all in that platform. So you saw me talk about these 5 things at the beginning, which is what we need. This is what we provide in the platform for Hadoop, right? So drag and drop visual framework to extract information out of Hadoop. You guys who've used Hadoop know how hard it is, right? MapReduce to get information out of Hadoop. Parallelism, so that we as you scale, whatever your environment is, it innovates at the chip level, at the core level, at the cluster level. It works with the hardware. That's the reason why I was telling somebody at the beginning, that's why I was invited to Beijing. When Intel launched the new chip, they only did 2 big events, one in California and one in China. Everywhere else they did small things. And I was invited to talk at that launch because Action Platform exploits the power of the chip to provide that transformational speed to our customers. But that's just one aspect of it. Rich analytics, pipeline architecture. Pipeline architecture because that's how we look at when we look at data flowing through organizations. It comes in, we connect to it. As it flows, we're analyzing it. As it goes into outcomes, we send it to the lines of business so that they can launch it, they can act on it. Okay? And then affordable, unlimited scale. And we do that for everyone. So talk about commercial things, but they're very affordable. Most of those customers that you see on the first chart were, and I'll talk about them at the end, the small gaming companies, right, startups. How could they afford massive platforms advantage like this? And they do that with Actien. So coders amongst you are familiar with this, which is what you have to do with Hadoop in order to get it to do something using MapReduce. And it takes a long time. We know because we used to do this inside. And with Actien, you do it like this. You do the same things, but we do it a lot faster, right? And if you can turn around that MapReduce job in 25 minutes, then it starts to deliver a lot more value to the organization. And then when you run it, it goes that much faster. We hold most of the TPCH records for performance on different levels of scale. That's what it does. That's what allowed Office Max to do market basket analysis from every 6 hours down to every minute. That's the sort of thing that it allows you to do. Okay, so that's a little bit about what's happening, the consequences of what's happening, why it's hard, and what you can do about it. But look, let's be honest. We know you have a lot of choice. We know there are a lot of big data vendors out there. So when you think about how do I choose my next platform, my next technology, what do I have to transform in order to get value from big data? One of the things is obvious is that the old technology stacks just won't hack it because they're not next generation. So the first thing you need to look at is it needs to be next generation. It needs to be able to cope with the volume, the scale, and the diversity of big data that's coming our way, right, from all these devices, and it's going to get worse. That's the first thing you look at. The next thing you look at is it's not about stitching together disparate technologies inside the organization, because by the time you do that, you miss those SLAs, you miss the customer expectation, you miss the expectation of the business, right? It's about an end-to-end platform. What is it that we can do that allows us to connect, to analyze at scale and speed, and to take action delivered at the point where it makes sense to the business, which is where the customer meets the business. It accelerates Hadoop. Hadoop is fantastic. It's great. It's here to stay. It is the best. It's transformational in a way because we now can deal with all this information that was out there and we had no means of dealing with it. We can now deal with it. The problem is getting information out and using it is hard, and it accelerates that. And there's a whole platform. If you look at any one of your business problems, you'll find when you get down to the bottom, it'll be one of two things. It'll be either an issue to do with time, so it's time critical, like the fraud guy, I need to know in a second, not a minute, or it's to do with discovery. It's like the Adeo in France, retail organization, fourth largest DIY store in the world, point of sale information. It's about discovery in all that masses of information, something that they can use to transform their business, and they did, right? So it's always down to this thing. We've got a platform that's optimized for those two things. Okay, so that's how you choose your next platform, and it really comes down to one thing, which is Actien. And the last thing, of course, is it's affordable for the rest of us. And I keep making that point because the world doesn't change if everybody doesn't partake. We're a global organization, not a startup. We're not a big vendor, but we're global. We have offices everywhere, from Australia all the way to the west coast of San Francisco, all over Europe. We've got customers 25,000 customers, lots and lots of blue chip names. But in that, we've got startups as well. It's cool. It's a gaming organization, fastest growing gaming organization on Facebook. Badoo is the fastest growing dating organization on BitRacy, but fastest growing organization on Facebook. And why is it that those little companies are able to afford to do analytics. What his school does is every click, every point, every interaction with the screen is analyzed. And the behavior of the game is changed to make it more sticky. So when people stay on the game longer, they can monetize their adverts longer. Right? That's what they do. And that's the games are free, but it's the monetization of the games is how they make the money. Badoo look at millions of IMs that take place, saying, do you want to meet for coffee or whatever else they talk about. When they talk about on the site for millions of people, in fact, if you look on the website, they have a counter that says how many active users they have, and it was well past 200 million last time I looked. They look at all these IMs, and they're looking for behavioral analysis, looking for patterns where they say, just like you were ready to travel and you presented an ad, well, these people they're ready to mate, so they present hotels, condoms, safes, whatever they need to make money. So it's a racy site, but from very large organizations like the Ministry of Defense all the way down to little startups, that's what Actin does, right? Turn data into analytics. So as a final thought, and it leads back to the point that I was making, this change with data is once in a lifetime change. It's happening. It's like the gold rush. It really will change everything that we see around us. And the organizations that thrive are the ones that adapt to that change. And I think today we've talked about some of the criteria to make that change. If you want to know more, then come and see me outside at our booth or at the end here. Okay? Thank you very much. Any questions? All right. Thank you.